wind screamed through the Montana mountains, like some wounded beast, battering the thick log walls of Jedediah Holt's cabin. 15 winters he had endured here, alone in this fortress of pine and stone he'd raised with his own hands, every notch and seam packed with mud and moss, to keep the wilderness out, and the memories in. Tonight, like every night, Jed sat by the fire, his knife working steadily over a block of wood. Another wolf was taking shape, jaws tilted to the ceiling as if caught mid-howl. Always wolves. He understood them. They mated for life, but survived alone when they had to. They trusted nothing but their own strength. The firelight flickered across his face, sharpening the lines carved deep by years of grief. At 39 he looked older. Gray streaked his black hair. His beard ran wild. His eyes carried the dullness of a man who had stopped caring the day he buried Mary and their unborn child beneath frozen Kansas earth. He'd set fire to the home they'd built, mounted his stallion, and ridden until the mountains swallowed him. That was another lifetime. Another man. A man who had once believed in mercy, in tomorrow, in God. The cabin was small, 20 feet square, a ladder to the loft, a straw mattress under furs, a rough-hewn table and 2 chairs though only one was ever used. Rifles hung above the door, shelves sagged with dried meat and herbs. Through the window real glass hauled at great cost from Billings. He watched the December snow fall, thick and merciless. Time no longer mattered. Days blurred into the same rhythm. Wake, work, eat, sleep, survive. His horse, Thunder, stamped restlessly in the lean-to. The black stallion was the only creature Jed trusted. The animal understood silence, respected boundaries, never asked questions when nightmares dragged Jed to pacing the floor. Until dawn. The stew bubbled. Venison from a buck shot 3 days ago. Calories against the cold. He stirred it absently, though his thoughts were elsewhere. Death, memory, silence. He had chosen this life of exile, away from townsfolk who whispered hermit and crossed themselves when he appeared on Main Street. Let them. They didn't understand. Caring only meant digging graves. Loving only meant loss. Outside, the storm worsened, the kind the old-timers called widowmakers. Blizzards that buried travelers and snapped weak roofs. Jed pulled on his buffalo coat and went to check Thunder. Snow stung his face like sand. Inside the stable, the horse's body gave off a heat more human than Jed wanted to admit. He worked through the motions. Fresh hay, breaking ice in the bucket, while his mind retreated from thoughts that lurked too close. Memories of what might have, of children never born, of laughter that had once filled the silence now pressing in on him. Such thoughts led nowhere but whiskey and loaded guns. Then he froze. The storm's voice had shifted, carrying a strange urgency, a note that prickled the hair on his neck. He knew these mountains. He could read their moods like scripture. Something was wrong. Somewhere out in that white abyss, someone was learning the hard lessons he already knew too well. But he pushed the thought aside, barred his cabin door and returned to carving his wolf. The wind roared through the night. By dawn the storm collapsed into eerie stillness. Snow lay in sculpted waves, erasing the familiar world. Thunder pawed the stall, ears flicking toward the valley below. Jed trusted the stallion's instincts. Strapping on snowshoes and slinging his rifle, he followed. An hour down the slope, he saw it. The stagecoach, overturned, broken, half buried in snow. Its wheels spun uselessly in the wind. 4 horses lay frozen in their traces, glassy-eyed in death. The driver hung at a grotesque angle from his seat. Scattered across the snow were remnants of lives interrupted. Letters, clothing, a child's wooden toy. Jed's gut tightened. He'd seen plenty of death, but this smelled of something more than storm and accident. Then he heard it, a sound faint, human, digging through a drift beside a boulder. His hand struck fabric, fine wool, lined with fur. A woman's cloak. Beneath it, a gloved hand, so small it might have been a child's. He worked faster, pulling free a young woman curled tight against the cold, chestnut hair tangled over her face. City clothes, delicate lace at collar and cuff. Absurd in this brutal country. He pressed fingers to her throat, expecting nothing. Cold marble skin, and then impossible faint flutter. A pulse. He should have walked away. He should have left her to the snow. Nothing good came from Carrie. He knew that truth better than anyone, but his arms were already lifting her, cradling her against his chest. She weighed almost nothing. Thunder stood patient as Jed mounted awkwardly, the woman limp against him. He pressed her to his chest, his body heat her only shield against the cold. The ride back was a desperate race against death. By the time he carried her inside, his fire had burned low. He stripped away her sodden layers with trembling hands, modesty damned against survival, and wrapped her in his buffalo robe. Her clothes steamed by the fire, filling the cabin with the ghost of roses and lavender, a scent from another world. Her skin lost its deathly pallor, a faint blush returning under the firelight, but her eyes remained closed. Jed sat back, staring at her, the enormity of what he'd done sinking in. He had broken his rule, let another human inside. Now her life rested in his hands. Hours dragged. He kept feeding the fire, kept watching the slow rise and fall of her chest. Alive, still alive. Near sunset, she stirred. A sound soft, fragile, escaped her lip. Then her eyes opened, green as spring leaves. She blinked, unfocused, then fixed on him. Terror sharpened her gaze. She screamed. Jed raised his hands. You're safe. Your coach crashed. Everyone else is gone. But the words could not soften the reality. Her eyes found her drying clothes, horror flooding her face. She clutched the robe to her throat, trembling. What have you? You were freezing, he said, voice rough from disuse. Wet clothes would have killed you. I did what was necessary. She recoiled against the wall. Necessary. The word broke, almost a sob. Everyone else is dead, he said, more gently. Her composure shattered. Names fell from her lips. Friends. A child. Jed's silence was answer enough. She crumpled, sobbing with the raw grief of someone whose world had just collapsed. Jed stood helpless, remembering his own night of shovels, graves and silence. At least she wasn't alone in hers. When her storm of tears passed, she straightened, clinging to some shred of dignity. I apologize. You saved my life. I am Charlotte Whitmore, of Boston. Jed Holt. That was all he gave. How long until we can reach town? Storm's not finished. Could be days, could be a week. Her mask cracked. A week. This is Montana, he said flatly. The mountains don't care what year it is. She absorbed this, fighting to remain composed. Then we'll have to make the best of an impossible situation. Jed gave a curt nod, but inside his walls trembled. He'd saved her, but at what cost? Her presence already pressed against every boundary he'd built for 15 years.